we repeat the previous process and mark the remaining surfaces to be glued with a pencil, and then gently grind the pencil marks away, thereby ensuring completely flat glue surfaces. Here's the piece after the sides were flattened and then glued together. Using the Intarsia grinder, we now remove the overlapped ends of the newly attached border strips. After this, we are ready to begin attaching the next set of borders. To create the outer border in our example, the slab of black material is marked and then cut into strips of the correct length with a trim saw. Following the steps previously described, all of the sides of the piece are ground flush, parallel, and even. Then we are ready for gluing the black strips on. This shows the piece after the first two black border strips have been attached with super glue. After the final two border strips have been attached, the overlapped ends are again removed with the Intarsia grinder. At this point, the Intarsia is nearly complete. With everything held together with super glue, the only remaining step is to attach a backing with epoxy and thereby secure all of the construction together. Now it's time to attach a backing to the Intarsia construction. Select a slab of material that is larger than the Intarsia piece and mark trim saw lines slightly beyond the perimeter of the Intarsia. If available, it's best to use a thin slab for the backing. While a thick backing slab will work okay, it will eventually need to be thinned down considerably to make the finished piece lighter, more useful, and overall more presentable. In our example, I've selected a piece of black basanite for the backing that is identical to the outer border of the Intarsia. In general, whenever possible, I prefer to make the backing out of the same material as the outer border. It's just an added level of design refinement that seems to make the finished piece more pleasing to the eye. Now, with that said, the job of the backing is primarily meant to be functional so as to increase the overall structural integrity of the piece. Most people will not even be looking at the backing anyway. Here we can see the result of a couple steps. The backing slab has been cut to the proper shape with a trim saw, and the two surfaces that will be glued together with epoxy have been marked with pencil in preparation for grinding them both flat. To flatten the backing piece and the back of the Intarsia construction, it's generally more efficient to use a flat lap with a 100 grit lap installed. You can use the Intarsia grinder for this step, but these are broad, flat surfaces which can typically take more time to flatten. In preparation for the epoxy, wipe the two flattened surfaces with acetone and then set them on wax paper or other nonstick surface. I find it convenient just to mix the epoxy right on the backing piece, but you can mix it elsewhere and transfer it to the backing piece. It's very, very important that the epoxy be mixed well, and just to make sure, my rule of thumb is always 1 minute. After the epoxy has been thoroughly mixed, set the Intarsia onto the glue-covered backing piece. Then press down on the piece and move it around to squish out as much of the epoxy as possible, and making certain that there are no areas without glue. I'm a firm believer that more is better, so to make sure all surfaces have glue coverage, I never scrimp on the amount of epoxy I use. After you finish this process, allow 3 to 4 hours curing time before proceeding. After the epoxy has cured, if you have an excess of backing material extending beyond the Intarsia border, you may want to carefully trim some of it off with a trim saw. At this point, you're almost done. All that remains is to take your piece and finish it up on the cabbing machine. It was a lot of work and took many steps, but it was worth it. If you found this interesting, then I encourage you to check out the William Holland School. It's a great way to spend a week in the mountains, and it's real easy on the wallet, too. Here's the information on the Intarsia grinder. The last I heard, the cost was under $400 plus shipping. He lives in St. Augustine, Florida, so if you're ever in the area, you can pick it up in person and save shipping costs.